So here is the Surpass Hobby rocket crawler motor. This is the 540 plus V2 version. What this is a sort of copy of the crawlmaster MAGNUM from Holmes Hobbies, if you like, but at around fraction the price. It comes in at around $40 or so, so expecting the cost similar to a crawlmaster expert, but getting some pretty different components on the inside. In the box, obviously, it's just foam. You have the motor, and they also come with two spare brushes. I haven't found a listing specifically to sell these, just replacement brushes separately, so it's nice to have some spares. So onto the motor itself, I got the 11 turn 540 plus, and one thing of note is that the turn number is not exactly the same as Holmes. On the listing, rated at 1700 RPM at 7.4 volts, so that works out to around 2200 kV, while the Holmes Hobbies Crawlmaster MAGNUM, the 11 turn version for 540 full size, is actually equivalent to an 1850 kV. So this particular motor also comes in different turn counts, so there's a 11, 13, 16 and 20 turn, but again, it's faster than the Holmes Hobbies motor. So I'm very curious as to the low speed control of the motor, obviously. So I've just connected to a 1080 ESC I have here, running off a 3S LiPo on an existing truck, but I've just unplugged it and plugged the leads into here. Let's turn that on. So let's go ahead and actually use the trim to step up the throttle slowly, and let's see what we get. This seems to be as slow as it wants to go. I'm very curious as to what it's like in the inside of the motor, so I'm going to go ahead and take it apart. And again, this uses 2mm hex hardware. These are 2mm stainless screws. Obviously, release the spring tension on the brushes before we take it apart. And back off the brushes a little bit. And take the end bell out. This part is pretty standard, obviously, bearing in the back, and then your brushes onto the armature itself. So there is obviously the retention ring here, which we'll have to turn and get out. So there we go. It took a little bit of work off camera. You basically just had to align these notches on this ring along the notches on the motor itself in order to get it out. Again, you have your 5-slot skewed rotor here. What's nice is they've gone ahead and actually used a resin balancing rather than drill balancing that could affect the quality of the magnetic field. Also, as you can see here, actually some of the laminations have actually come loose. That's not very promising. Again, there are some blemishes in the laminations here, especially here. It's completely come off. Anyways, let's go ahead and measure the diameter. It comes in at around 28mm as opposed to 23mm, I think, in the regular brush motors. Also in the can you have your nice and strong neodymium magnets, and yeah, the rest is pretty similar to a Crawlmaster MAGNUM, but obviously build quality is a bit lacking here. So here I'm testing out the new 540 plus motor from Surpass Hobby. This is just basically VS410 VFD transmission, a 3S LiPo. It's just running off of a Sidewinder 4 and running S610 3 straight axles. Overdrive is only about 7%, and it comes from the VFD transmission itself. Got some cool innovations, little Nova foams, and these are Proline Super Swampers in a G8 compound, and the ambient temperature today is around 35 Celsius, and it's a JX 12 volt 46 kg servo. So low speed control of this motor is actually pretty good, though I'd still say the compared to the Crawlmaster Pro, that's the only other brushed motor that I've ran so far from Holmes. Compared to that, the Crawlmaster Pro is actually smoother. Torque wise, from the so the Crawlmaster Pro 10 turn 550 size can, torque wise feels pretty similar. But smoothness, I think the Crawlmaster Pro is a bit smoother. Other thing, notable thing about this particular motor is I think the build quality is a bit lacking, as you see from the split laminations, but also it's a lot noisier than the Crawlmaster Pros. The smoothness is only a real noticeable difference on startup. Once you get going, it feels pretty similar actually. Power and speed is also very similar to the 550 can, so that's a good thing since this is a much smaller motor, a shorter can, and since it's a Magnum design with a bigger armature, so that's expected. The low speed, as you can see, is actually pretty nice. Also, it has a lot of torque, so it drives similar to the Crawlmaster Pro. When it comes against any sort of load or like inclines, you don't really have to increase the throttle that much, since the torque kind of just takes care of it. As you can see, the drag brake does hold pretty well, though there is a little bit of slippage. Let's open it up and have a check on motor temps. I don't really have a thermometer, but I'm just going to put my finger against it and just see. It is quite uncomfortably hot. I'd say probably around 60°C, I guess, which is a bit hotter than the Crawlmaster Pro in the same terrain. Since this is also a smaller can than the 550, I'd say it's doing alright, but that was just low speed crawling. However, oh, by the way, I'm running a 56 tooth spur and an 11 tooth pinion, so yeah, it's actually geared a bit lower than the 550 already. Keep an eye on the temperature, because you know, that was just some pretty low speed stuff. There's no sort of continue on throttle driving there, but still it's getting pretty warm, so yeah. Anyways, I'm pretty impressed with it so far. The driving characteristics are sort of as expected, I guess. It does feel very different from a regular 540 motor, but test now is just longevity. So here's the truck about 2 weeks since the last running video I filmed, and I've since then had about, I'd say, 7 to 8 hours of total drive time on this particular setup. There are some changes. Some of the parts have been removed to shed some weight, new tyres as well. The Super Swampers have worn out since, and also new foams. Also changed over to BIXL ESC. Drives basically identical to Sidewinder 4 for the most part, but the motor's actually held up, and you know, it's kind of surprising knowing that it had quite a few blemishes and you know, quality control issues, especially with the delamination of the armature. But so far it's survived completely. It drives pretty similar to the first video I filmed, and you know what, I'd actually go and say that this motor is, you know, worth it, since it's smaller and lighter than a regular 550 can, but it drives very similar to bigger can motors. It has a surprising amount of torque packed in it. It does run a bit warm still, and I'll just keep running this and testing it until it dies or it needs to change brushes. But so far I'm happy with it, and I would go as far to say that, you know what, if you're curious and you want to try this, I would recommend it, since it's relatively inexpensive and it does have a different design than your standard brush motors. And given, yes, this is most definitely a copy of the Holmes crawlmaster MAGNUM, you know, if you're curious, I don't think it'd hurt to give this motor a try. So that is it so far. Perhaps I'll follow up with a different video if anything does happen with this motor, but that's it for the review of this motor. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.